I was remembering what Tom Shippey said once. A quote from him came into my mind recently, but that was when the early time of the news of the show was happening. And Tom Shippey was saying, and he was, of course, the Tolkien scholar, a very noted Tolkien scholar, and he was involved at the early stages in this production. And he was saying that the estate would demand that the main shape of the Second Age events were accurate. And I forget what his exact wording was, but he did say that there's some room for some interpretation or for some creative liberty, because there are just some things that Tolkien didn't specifically establish. But he also said that what he did establish, like the events that shaped the Second Age, that should be lore accurate. Whatever Tolkien wrote, Amazon should have stuck within those boundaries. So yes, all the events that happened in the Second Age, they should have kept as accurate as possible. And even if the estate wouldn't have let them tell the story exactly, well, then at the very least, your characters, the characters Tolkien wrote, you should have been faithful to how they were. You should have been accurate to that. Maybe their events can't unfold the way he wrote exactly, but why not the characters? They are nothing like how he wrote them. Gil-galad is nothing as Tolkien wrote him. And Galadriel, yes, again, all of these characters, they should have been faithful to that. They have a lore expert on set who is now promoted to writer amongst two new writers. One's only credit is Coronation Street, which is a soap opera here in the UK. It's going to be worse in season 3, people. Oh, good lord. Oh, man. It's so soap opera, so that makes sense to me. Who are we supposed to follow? Who are we supposed to be rooting for? Where are the heroes? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I know. This should have been a slam dunk, I think, at least, because you have a big action set piece with the Siege of Eregion. You have this big battle, and even then they can't get it right. It was poorly choreographed. It just didn't make sense from a battle standpoint, and the continued disgruntled, sympathetic orc thing going on this whole time of the battle just undercut the whole thing. Meanwhile, the elves are being stupid. All lore aside, there isn't a thing in here even true to the spirit of Tolkien. The story on its own doesn't make any sense and is emblematic of terrible modern Hollywood writing. Yes, I mean, can we all just admit that Payne and Kay were not qualified for this show? And there is no sincere effort to maintain the spirit of Tolkien. They'll say it plenty of times. They'll say, we're going back to the book, back to the book, back to the book. Well, yeah, apparently they're just going back to the Lord of the Rings and ripping it off and repurposing it. That's what they mean. But they're being completely disingenuous, and they can't even craft just a generic fantasy show and have that be entertaining in itself. It is so boring. Lore aside, it is poorly conceived, poorly written, and just such a slog to get through. Forget the lack of lore, there is a noticeable lack of care and passion with this show. Clearly, they're just relying on the brand, the IP, Amazon's budget, and I don't get why that's their priority. That the priority is to bastardize the lore, go out of your way to bastardize what Tolkien wrote and to actively antagonize the fans. There was another thing too that I know fans were bothered by, was Círdan shaving his beard, and for no apparent reason. Why did you have him do that? That is one very noticeable or notable characteristic, is Círdan being old, one of the oldest elves, and that he had a beard. What was the point of showing him shave it? There wasn't. And the way they did it was so nonsensical. He shaved with a seashell and sea foam, apparently. There was something on his face. Not shaving cream, obviously. So what was that? It was sea foam and a seashell, and he just had the smoothest shave ever. Is that just to show that they groom themselves? Oh, yeah, Galadriel has the 9 now. She's the one that has the rings to hide them away. Okay, so this is going back to Celebrimbor. When he knows about Sauron's deception, he full-on knows, and he still agrees to finish the rings, to finish the 9. Why? For one, with full knowledge of who Sauron is and full knowledge of what he intends to do with him, I guess. And okay, He's gonna finish them. And then when he does, he finishes them, and then he has second thoughts and tries to destroy them. It immediately changes his mind. Oh, I did bad, I guess. And he puts them in the fire to try to destroy them. But they're not destroyed. He takes them back out of the fire, and they're quite cool to the touch. Now you're having second thoughts. And conveniently, Sauron, who's been on his butt this whole time of checking in on him, of his progress and making the rings, now he decides to take a bathroom break while all of this is happening. So he gets out of captivity, takes the rings, and then, pieces out and gives them to Galadriel to hide, who is the only person responsible for all of these events. This is Galadriel's fault. Everything that happened to Celebrimbor is Galadriel's fault. And their interchange, when they reunite, I can't describe, what's the word? Vomitous? I don't know. There's just no consequences for anyone's stupidity. Galadriel didn't tell Celebrimbor who Halbrand was. She told him not to treat with him, but she left out some very important information, and all of this went down because of her deception. Celebrimbor knows it's Sauron and still sends 6 guards to apprehend him. Like, he knows what Sauron is, right? He knows very well. He knows what he was capable of. Clearly, he had him trapped in a simulation for weeks. And the way they portray his powers, too, when he does get confronted by the other elf soldiers, it was very much like Darth Vader-esque. Like, it's just Star Wars now. He has the Force. So Sauron's blood is why the 9 have this attachment, I guess, or had this extra evil effect on the 9 rings for men. So Sauron couldn't get the extra mithril, so the 9 rings were made with, just again, the inconsistencies with the rings themselves. It's just all over the place, and what they can do and their effects. And he hasn't even made the 1 ring yet. King Durin is like off the rails. He was like immediately affected by the ring. And then you also have Galadriel's ring, like it gives her visions, but also she can heal. None of that is how the rings work at all. None of this is how it works. I can't predict where this is going to go from here. Dwarves were unaffected by the rings. So apparently they make the dwarves greedier than normal. Did the other dwarven kings, did they get the rings, or is it just Durin at this time? I don't know. I think he said that, give me a ring tax and I'll give you the ring. I can't remember if they were handed off or handed out to the other dwarves. It's implied that I guess that every ring is like the 1 ring, and it just immediately ensnares you. It's not even consistent, because at times with the elven rings, it seems that Gil-galad had a little bit of a moment there where he didn't want to even entertain the thought of not having the ring. Which, even with the elven rings thing, is already strange to begin with when it comes to their curing of the elves fading, so it cures the elves somehow. I don't know how it works, but it does. But when it comes to Galadriel's ring, it seems to operate differently and does whatever the plot needs it to do in any particular given situation. The rings, the Palantirs, Mithril, everything does what the plot wants at each moment. And it just all seems extremely forced and just conveniences every which way. And it just really doesn't seem thought out at all. That it's just all these things are just thrown in here, and no one wants to think about the character arc or the whole storyline moving along. So when it came to season 1, it really felt like they tacked on the creation of the elven rings. Oh, and to mention of Celeborn at the very end too. Galadriel's husband. He's around somewhere, but in the meantime, someone's kissing his girl. It's going to be for a very awkward family reunion. It just seems that they crafted this story with what they wanted to get to.